Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shauna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Hi, everybody. Shauna Corden here. Welcome to the Playbook for Performance podcast. Our mission is to make work fun again by building better leaders. So, this month we're talking about a new dialogue, and I'm super excited because I'm writing this new book, and the book is about the new dialogue. It's this whole idea that we have gone from a culture that used to be, let's agree to disagree and we can still be friends, everything's great, and I still love you. What's happened in the last couple of years is that people have become more and more polarized. They don't have the energy to sit in the discomfort of disagreement. They ache for certainty, whether that's the election, whether that's COVID, who knows, but I'm doing some research on this, and I want you to know what you can do to not lose all of those super important relationships in your life. One of the things that we talked about last week was this whole idea of the fallout of conflict and the damages and the scenarios. And we listed a lot of the contributing factors and what makes people sort of dig in and say, this is the way it's going to be. And what makes people just fold and say, blanket, I'm walking away. I don't have the energy to deal with this. And it could have been masking, it could have been vaccination, it could have been who do you vote for, etc. But there is, I think, a significant mourning that's happening out there because people are not able to hold two polarizing ideas in their mind at the same time. So if we take the war in Europe and what's going on there, people are associating Russian people with Putin. That's not the same thing. It's like good people can make bad decisions. Good people can do bad things. And we need to recognize that people may vote differently than us, may support different causes than we do, and we can still be friends. And what we need to do is understand one another. So we talked a little bit about the two reactions to this situation are fight. So I'm going to dig in, I'm going to insult you and everything that you've ever done in your life, or I'm going to fold. I'm walking away from this relationship. I don't have the energy to be in the same room as you and deal with this discomfort. And a lot of people are doing that to create certainty. They want to feel confident about what will happen because there's been so much in our society that we can't feel confident about. How many of you predicted that President Trump was going to win in 2016? Probably not many. How many of you predicted Biden would win this last time? Probably a fair amount. But did we predict the outcomes that we're seeing now? Did we think that there would be a war in Eastern Europe? Did we think that we'd have hyperinflation? Did we think that these things are going to happen? No. And so because of all these things that are happening that are creating uncertainty in people's lives, they are creating scenarios in their life that allow them to be certain. And sometimes it's the identity that a person has about themselves that says, am I brave? Will I voice a potentially unpopular opinion? What is at risk for me if I do that? Or this idea of self-censorship. So the idea of I will not express how I feel about this issue because I don't feel safe or I don't have positional authority, etc. So what are the areas that influence that? It might be who has power in this situation. Can you hurt my reputation? Will it hurt my employment considerations? Does it affect my children's play group? Or if you've surrounded yourself with a bunch of people who think just like you do, then we don't have diversity, but you may have some safety because you can predict how people around you will react in a given situation or to a news event, etc. So I want to arm people with the data that shows the sheer number of people who have lost relationships. I've been doing a ton of research over the last week, conversations with friends, family, colleagues, and asking them, do you have a situation like this? Without exception, everyone has named a relationship that has been dissolved because they are not willing to hold the space and entertain two different ideas, and they're not necessarily different value sets. Family, that's always important to people. How family shows up, though, is very different. For some people, providing for their family, making sure that they have a strong education, that they're given every opportunity possible. That's how they define their definition and their value of family. For other people, it's always being home with them, being their playmate, making sure that they're safe, that they're comfortable. And yet these two people are saying, family is the most important thing to me. They're claiming that as their value, but how it's executed is very different. And so these people that are arguing about political situations both have a value of politics, about the integrity of our country, but how it's implemented is very different. I remember when I was in high school, our high school English teacher did not use the terms Republican, Democrat. He said, how many of you think the government should be hands off the people? Raise your hand. I raised my hand. Okay. How many of you think it's the government's responsibility to take care of people? People raise their hand. And he goes, you guys are Democrats. The people who raised their hand before are Republicans based on the old definitions, right? And I found that very interesting. And did we think that people should be compassionate? Of course we did. There was no one in the class that I considered a psychopath, at least not yet. And we all thought that it was really important that people behaved the way they did and that the government behaved the way that we saw its role. But what is the outcome of those things? What happens? And so the book that I am working on is trying to help people understand what happens when we get in this conflict and that people move away from one another. They sever relationships they've had forever. They leave jobs that have been very important to them. A huge part of the Great Resignation is this. I'm not willing to deal with this. I'm not willing to stay in the space of ambiguity or people who do not think like I do or share the same values. They are the same values in a likelihood, but they are expressed in different ways. And when people say, I'm not sure what my values are, I say, great. Think about this. Think about where you spend your time, where you spend your money. If you were to show up to work and there was a big, Wi-Fi crisis and people couldn't use the internet and they couldn't do their work and they said, okay, everybody go home. It's a paid day off. You'd already dropped your kids off at school. How would you go spend your time? Some people are going to sprint to the salon to get a mani-pedi. Some people are going to go out to lunch. Other people are going to go for a hike. Those are reflective of your values and also kind of the pent-up demand about something. The other piece that's sitting out there is this whole idea of where you spend your money. Where do you donate? Are you donating to feed the children? Or, off the continent? Are you sharing with families in your local neighborhood who are in need and you're doing it quietly? Are you trying to maximize your tax write-off because they're a 501c3 organization? And none of those are bad. It's all great to contribute, but think about where you're going to spend the money. Some people are like, shoes, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going to spend my money. So the other equivalent of that showing up to the, your workplace and the doors are locked because the Wi-Fi is down or whatever. The equivalent is you put on your winter coat, you haven't worn it for 6-7 months, you put your hand in your pocket and you find $100 bill. You're like, bonus, payday, extra $100. No one ever thinks, I lost $100 in the spring, but people go bonus. So you've paid all your bills, you've done what you need to do. What are you going to spend that $100 on? And again, it might be the thing that you're going to spend your time on, or it could be something totally different. I'm going to buy a gift for someone, or I'm going to treat myself to that bottle of wine that I haven't purchased because I thought it was too much. But, now that I have this extra free $100, that's what I'm going to spend it on. So those are clues. But the other clue that is so important that really tells my clients, this is what your value is what is the opposite of what drives you crazy? So if it really ticks you off when people are late, punctuality is a value. If it ticks you off or upsets you when you find typos in your work, that professionalism might be a value or competence might be a value. But what is it that really shows up for you that really tweaks you? And of late, the thing that's creating the polarity is people experiencing other people who think differently than they do. I'm for vaccines. You're not for vaccines. I'm for wearing your mask in your car by yourself all the time. I'm not for that. I'm never going to wear a mask unless I absolutely have to. So we're seeing that kind of polarity, and we think it's an indication of a value. But is it really? Is it a value? Are we telling ourselves a story that someone else's behavior is actually blocking my purpose? Probably not. We're probably on the same side about a lot of things. We care about our kids. We want to be happy. We want our kids to have a future that's better than ours, etc. So each week I like to present a tool in the podcast. And this week, I want you to keep an inventory of all the areas that you censor yourself. You don't feel like you can be your true, authentic self, that you can't express how you really feel about a topic. And who is the audience? Is the audience your workplace and you're telling yourself it's not professional? Is it your family because you know that they have causes that are near and dear to them that are not yours? Is it something political that really ticks you off, that, we're spending money on this instead of that? Whatever it might be, make a note of when you feel the need to censor yourself. And if it's not censoring yourself, but you're imposing your feelings on someone in a less than delicate way, you're just like, well, they're wrong, then why is it that you feel that way? And I would love to have you be part of my research for this book. We're in the process right now of building a website that'll allow you to take a very brief survey, anonymous if you wish, that talks about what are the things that have created the polarity and the separation of those formerly near and dear to you. What was it? Was it your energy level? Was it a new awareness, a conflict within you that made it difficult? What was it that made you choose to separate? Either fight, to get in there and argue. Maybe you're at a school board meeting and you're complaining about how teachers are instructing your kids. Or was it your faith group, where you used to worship, and something happened, something changed, and you went, nope, I'm changing shop. I'm going to the church down the street, whatever it might be. Was it family situations? We have Easter coming up in a couple weeks here. That's generally a place where people get together and they share a meal together to celebrate. Are there people who are not going to be at your table that were a couple of years ago because you don't want the drama that's happening? So those are some triggers for you to think about this idea of being brave or self-censoring or just lambasting someone. We want that inventory. And then we want you to really think about that analysis. Why is it that I feel brave in some areas, that I have to censor in other areas? Do some experimentation. Create a hypothesis. Test. Is the story that you're telling yourself actually true? Is it really true? That's the homework for this week. As usual, I like to highlight a story in the news that people are doing well, or maybe a leader that really tanked it. I think one of the most interesting stories in the news this week is Elon Musk buying a big chunk of Twitter because he thinks that's how we're going to preserve freedom of speech, First Amendment, all of that. instead of the censorship. This is all related. So I find it fascinating. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? But that's the way to vote. Remember, we're talking about your time or your money. So he's going to be on the board. That's his time, his money. He's got a lot of it, granted, but he voted with his money. That indicates a value of his. So think about that for yourself. Where are you showing up with your time and your money? And how are you implementing that value that might be different than your peers? So that's all for this week. Please contact us at podcast@shawnacorden.com. We'd love to hear your input, and we'll be posting in the show notes coming up as soon as we've got that survey site set up and ready for you to contribute. Can't wait, but don't wait till then. Send us a note. We want to hear about it. Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shauna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shawnacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shauna Corden.